it's something important for me. I can't imagine it wanting to write anything else. The new novel I'm writing is the theme is going to be wildlife trafficking, and it's going to be set in Kakadu. So that's you can't run out of important environmental issues in this country or any other country, I imagine.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. My name is Flic and today I have one of Australia's most treasured best-selling authors of Australian rural fiction joining me. She's had a former life as a lawyer, then made her way into writing, and thank goodness that she did, because she is just giving us so many novels with so many beautiful, beautiful tales. I have a lot of questions for our guest today. I think this is going to be a thoroughly entertaining and enlightening show. I'm so pleased that you're here for it. My guest today is the wonderful author of the new book, Wild Horses, Jennifer Scoullar. Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. Brumby's Run is truly one of my favourite books
Oh, really?
of all times. So I'm having a little bit of an out of body moment right at this second, thinking about the fact that I actually get to talk to you. But I wanted to actually start our conversation if we go right back, because as I mentioned in our opening, you didn't actually start your career as a writer. You started it as a lawyer. But if we even look slightly further back beyond that, you actually started writing a novel as a young child. Can you take me through what inspired you to pick up the pen as a young kid?
Oh, well, look, I've always loved horses, and I loved the Elaine Mitchell um, Silver Brumby books. So I think the book I started writing was probably I was 8, and it was some sort of plagiarized version of the Silver Brumby. But Elaine Mitchell is such a lyrical writer. Her prose is just absolutely magnificent, and I I spent a long time um, analyzing, I suppose, her prose and why it worked for me, because I've always been a bit of a nerd. And yeah, so that was my first book. I don't know what happened to it. I used to have it, um, but then life gets in the way, and I forgot about writing as I grew older.
Yeah, it's so common. I actually hear that. I was going to ask you, I have another question I'm going to come back to in a moment, but it's just so interesting to hear that you started writing at such a young age. I love that you talked about that sort of plagiarism of someone else's of writing, because I think a lot of writers or a lot of artists or creative people start out there. We're trying to sort of emulate or discover why something works in the first place. And that's often the inspiration as to why we begin these things. But then, as you mentioned, that's not the immediate career path that you then took. You went into law, which in so many ways at least presents on the outside as being very different. So what do you think caused you to sort of forget writing and turn towards a career like that?
Well, look, partly it was because I got very good marks in year 12, and my parents just assumed that I would do a course which as high a course as I could, from as my marks would let me. I wanted to do veterinary science, um, but then I might not quite have got into that, but I easily got into law, and my mum was very pleased and proud of me, and I just sort of went along with it. And maybe that's a lesson that we shouldn't just let life sweep us on, away on it, the river of somebody else's ambition. um,
Yeah, absolutely. Good point, Jennifer. I was just going to ask you as well, what do you think steers so many people away from the path that they're meant to be on? Because this is not an uncommon theme that I've discovered in talking to people from all sorts of different backgrounds, even entrepreneurs, where they've taken one journey sort of into young adulthood and their early years, maybe their 20s and 30s, and then they've picked something up that was a passion for them as a child and have ultimately come back to that thing. And lots of people seem to steer away from what it is they know as a child that they're meant to do. And I believe for you, you did sort of have that feeling as a kid, like, I'm going to be a
Oh,
writer when I
absolutely.
grow up.
Yeah,
Mm.
I knew I was going to be a writer. There was just no doubt about it. Yeah, and I did enjoy the law. I enjoyed studying the law. I liked the way that it taught you to think critically, and it taught me how to learn. There's a lot of learning, and you have to be rational and you have to be logical, but you also have to have an intellectual curiosity about people, because the law ultimately applies to people. So I did enjoy it, but once I did enjoy that, particularly I think the study, but once I actually started practicing it, I found it was very very intense emotionally,
Mm.
especially for someone who finds it hard to put aside their emotions. Because you sort of have to. You have to, have people say you need to leave your emotions in the office. Well, I couldn't do that, so that became a problem.
Yeah, look, I'm one of those people myself. I am who I am. All of it comes with me wherever I go, and I
Yes,
think a lot of people that are expressive and have a lot of empathy are like that. And you actually worked in prosecution for a
I
while,
did.
and then yeah, so you must have been really dealing with some very heavy stuff. Do you think that's part of the reason why you ended up steering back towards creativity and ultimately back to what you were meant to do, which is writing? Was it sort of that was pulling you out and away from the law?
Well, I didn't enjoy prosecuting people,
Mm.
although some of them deserved to be prosecuted. There was no doubt
Yes.
about that. Um, and then I moved to legal aid, and I was defending people, and then my empathy really started to um, fade away, because I started to think I didn't want to defend these people, because some of them didn't deserve defending, but then others. What I found was that people, young people in particular, um, a lot of them really didn't have much of a hope. Uh, and early intervention can help, but it's not early enough for many of them. So I actually became a foster parent then, because I thought early intervention, you've got to have it earlier. And as a foster parent, you can actually put a lot of those supports and therapeutic care in earlier than you can when you're dealing with a 16-year-old at a magistrate's court, because it's almost too late for some of them at that stage, which is just appalling.
Mm.
Um, yeah, so I went down from being a national prosecutor down to legal aid, down to foster care, and then out of law altogether. So I slowly, my my career slowly sank down and down and down.
Well, it sounds like it must have, in a way, pulled some of you, I guess, the emotional being as well. As you're saying, you started to sort of lack that empathy. It was sort of pulling you out and away from it. But how beautiful for you to have seen something that I guess was missing or that could be changed in the justice system and go, well, I'm going to try and be part of that solution. And you did, fostering. What was that experience like for you? Because I guess unless you've actually done it, most people don't know much about it.
Well, it's incredibly rewarding, and it's also incredibly heartbreaking. Although I must say that I say now I have 4 children. One of my original foster children is we've adopted, and he's now he was on the road to being sent to a home for disabled children. He is now an intensive care nurse at our local hospital, and is the most incredibly um, sort of giving, kind, clever people that you could ever find in the world. So even though there are a lot of sad stories in foster care, I mean, I I lost children back to bad situations, um, but I didn't lose him. And so yes, so he's now an adopted part of our family, and absolutely irreplaceable. So yeah, so I could never say, even though there was a lot of heartbreak, I look at this boy and I think if it wasn't for my decision to give up law and go into fostering and start writing again, he wouldn't be with us. So, and he definitely wouldn't be an intensive care nurse, helping
Mm.
people every day of his life. So, yeah.
How incredible. What, and you mean, you must be, for starters, just so incredibly proud of him
Oh,
for the achievements.
I can't
Huge.
believe it. People said that, maybe he was autistic, maybe, and we found out the problem was none of that. It was just that nobody ever talked to him. He he was the son of a very young single mum, very very young, who had her own problems, um, and she was frightened to let other people look after him. But she was only 17, so she wanted to go out. So she would keep him in the cot with the TV on, and kids can't learn to talk from the TV. It takes She thought that he would learn to talk from the television because the television was people were talking, but it takes two to talk. It has to be a conversation. Someone has to say something, and then the other person, and then they leave a gap for the other person to say something. And I did a program called "It Takes Two to Talk" with him because he was, as a speech therapy thing, and I realized then that nobody had ever stopped the conversation to give him a chance to say something. Um,
Wow.
so yeah,
That's
yeah,
That's just amazing. I mean, I guess most of us who have been privileged enough to not grow up in that kind of scenario would never, it would never occur to us that there's not a place for us to actually have a moment to speak, and how important that
yeah.
is.
So now he
Wow.
just won't stop talking.
You've unleashed the beast, Jennifer.
I have.
That's wonderful. What an absolutely epic arc for him, but also for you in terms of that.
Completely. Yeah, it's one of the most wonderful things that has ever happened in my life. But I don't want to minimize the difficult emotional sort of stress that comes from fostering children when you have very little control about their welfare, except when they're directly with you. Yeah.
Mm, yeah, that must be incredibly challenging. And again, just thinking about the sort of the arc of your own story of starting out, picking up and quote unquote plagiarizing slash writing your own
Yes.
first novel at 8, and then sort of going into law, different styles of law, then into fostering, having this massive and profound journey that you've clearly undertaken, and then finding your way back to writing. But you also mentioned very early in the interview, I think, that you had actually intended or had hoped to study to become a vet. And this is interesting because so much of your work centers around including animals.
Yeah.
And clearly, you've spent so much of your life around animals, in particular horses. And your new book is, of course, called Wild Horses. So clearly, there's a very, very big link for you there. Was writing a way for you just to express what you were going through, or did you find that it was a way for you to connect with the stories of animals that you didn't get to do as a vet because that was not the path you actually went down?
Oh, look, both. But I wrote a book called My last book was called The Rivertown Vet, and in it, the main character is a vet, and I loved writing her because it was like I was a vet. I had to. She did things that I would have loved to do. So I did live my life vicariously a little bit through that vet in the Rivertown Vet. But yeah, animals have always been my passion. Conservation. All my books have environmental themes. Um, yeah, so I've got a book called Billabong Bend, which is the conservation, the environmental issue is water use in the Murray-Darling, which is incredibly relevant, I think, at the moment. There's one, Currawong Creek, is about fracking on the Darling Downs, and the that's actually the world that my new book Wild Horses is set in. Um, um, yeah, so I've got Brumby's Run, the environmental theme. There was cattle in the high country, in Brumbies in the high country, and the incredible dilemma that it causes, because we love our Brumbies, but they do damage, and
Yeah.
what's the answer? So yeah, all my books have environmental themes. They all include lots of animals and lots of wonderful country people, particularly strong country women.
Yes, I've definitely noticed that theme, and your new book certainly, poses another beautiful female lead character as well that goes through sort of a scandal, I guess, in a way, not with really any fault of her own, and then sort of finds her way into a completely different direction. And this, I mean, is that sort of somewhat reflective of the fact that you've had different experiences and you've changed the course of your life? Do you feel compelled to write stories about women that have these major changes in their life as a result?
Well, it seems like maybe I do, because I've written so many of them. Um, yeah, I liked the idea that that the main character Christy she thought her life was on the right path, and then through no fault of her own, she was blindsided, and her career just ended. And how I liked the idea of how would someone like that get back to what they wanted to do when all doors, all normal, looking doors, were firmly shut. So yeah, I suppose I have written quite a few books about people finding their way back to what they didn't even know what that they wanted sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, beautifully put. And we'll definitely dive a bit more into the story of your book because it truly is captivating. I mean, I've had the pleasure of reading the first sort of portion of it, and I mean, you had me hooked by the end of the first page. I was just hook,
Oh,
line, and sinker. You had me, Jennifer. So I've been just fascinated by the journey. I can't wait to read the rest of it. But you really do write compelling stories and compelling stories about women and obviously our beautiful landscapes, our beautiful animals, everything that comes with what we're so privileged in Australia to have access to. And I can see how you've extrapolated and pulled all of that beauty. But you also pose a lot of questions in the book as well, or you leave the reader with lots of questions and things to
oh,
ponder,
good.
I think,
That's
about
good.
their life, the environment. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's quite incredible. But coming back to, I guess, the root of where your writing comes from, because you have made that big transition or several transitions really to get you to being, the writer of 11 novels, and I'm sure with plenty more to come as well.
Oh,
So,
yes.
yeah, I love to hear that. That makes me so happy. So, obviously, you've had to probably do a bit of, I would say, mental gymnastics or a bit of mindset shifting to transform between these different careers and pathways. Can you take us through, I guess, what you were going through in your mind when you transitioned? I think, you were fostering, and then that's maybe when writing sort of came back into the picture or somewhere around there.
Yeah, it was
What
around then.
what was that there happening for you there?
Well, not only was I sort of throwing away a career that most people thought was a terrific career. I also got divorced, and that was a very challenging time in my life because I was facing the um, the real prospect of raising 4 children on my
Mm,
own. So everything sort of conspired to sort of shake my world. Um, but now I realize it was all for the best. And to be able to look back and think it was all for the best is great now. But at the time, it was, you know, it was practically and emotionally extremely difficult. And there were moments of deep self-doubt, and I was exhausted and anxious all the time for about a year. I think I was anxious, and but then slowly, my writing. Um, I was on the farm. I had my horses. I had my kids, and my writing was uplifting me every day. And I slowly just emerged from that sort of fog of um of confusion, I suppose, because my life was so different. And I realized that there was light at the end of the tunnel, and this was genuinely a second chance for me to live the life that I'd envisioned when I was a kid. I'd always wanted to be. I wasn't going to be a writer. I was going to live on a lovely country property with my horses and my dogs and my kids. I always thought I'd have kids, and suddenly that was all happening. so, so it was it was a wonderful feeling of elation when I stopped feeling sorry for myself and started to realize the opportunity that life was giving me. Um, and I just haven't looked back. I couldn't be happier. I couldn't be more content. Um, yeah, I couldn't be more fulfilled.
That's beautiful to hear. And, we often hear about that whole, the phoenix rising from the ashes, that moment where people pick themselves back up and they pull themselves up by the bootstraps and they sort of go, well, this is the life that I have. But how beautiful for you to also have that moment of recognition that the life that you always really wanted was sort of right there
Yeah,
for the taking.
exactly. It was quite miraculous.
And so now you obviously spend a lot of time with animals. Clearly you've done this your whole life. You've spent a significant time around horses in particular. And in your new book, Wild Horses, a big portion of it centers around using horses as sort of a mental or well-being.
Yeah, equine therapy. Mm.
Yeah, so equine therapy. So how did you find out about that, and what inspired you to use that, I guess, as a tool to help your characters on their journey in this book?
Well, I suppose I first found out about it as a formal thing, equine therapy, when was fostering, because we there were a lot of there was a lot of education, sort of professional development for foster carers that the Victorian government provided, and the foster care agency Ozchild, wonderful, provided, and they had some sessions on equine therapy and how useful it could be for traumatized kids. And I really resonated with that because I thought everything they're saying, it's about about how grounding and calming being around horses can be. I I'd felt myself. So then I became more interested in it, and yeah, it was useful for my foster kids to be around the horses, and I decided I'd write a book where it was part of the way some broken souls healed, not just humans but horses as well.
Beautifully put. How broken souls healed. I love that. That's going to stick with me. I think it's really interesting because, I mean, as we've seen in your books, you sometimes write from this perspective of different animals. You've explored all sorts of different things throughout your writing career. It's not just horses that you have an affection
Absolutely
for.
not. No.
No, it's animals broadly, I would say, but you do seem to sort of have a very clear association with horses more from the perspective of the profound effect that they can have on a human being, maybe more so than dogs and cats and other animals. I guess most people would typically consider to be companion animals or animals to have in the home. Obviously not everyone has a property or access to a horse, I recognize that, but what for you makes the distinction between the kind of companionship and healing that happens with a horse versus, say, a dog or a cat?
uh, well, I in one of my books, The Memory Tree, I've actually written chapters from the point of view of trees. So um, trees can be companions. Dogs and cats and all sorts of pets can give you the sort of unconditional love and support that is very, it can help us and make us feel better. The difference with horses, I think, is that one, you're necessarily outside when you're with a horse, so that automatically puts you in the natural world. Um, so that helps. But also, as prey animals, horses can. if you're not confident and if you're not um, putting yourself out there in a genuine, kind way, horses sense it and it frightens them. So they become skittish. Um, they they lack they will lack trust in you because they don't think you're a leader that they can follow. A horse wants to have a relationship with you, and if you want the horse to do what you say, then you need to get the horse to accept you as somebody that they're happy to follow. They won't follow you if they think that you're in any way being inauthentic. So,
Right.
so that's a difference, I think, with horses, and also just the fact that they're so big. Um, you have to be careful with them, and you have to sort of acknowledge their them if you want them to go along with you. Because if a horse doesn't want to go along with you, you can't just pick it up like you can a dog. You know, if you've got a Yorkie, you can just pick him up if he doesn't want to go somewhere. But with a horse, they they go places because they agree to go, not because you make them.
Gosh, that's a good way of actually distinguishing it. They go because they, yeah, okay. That's a beautiful way of putting it, Jennifer. That really like separates that. I fully understand that. Yeah, a dog or a cat will come with you because they know it's the right thing to do, even if they don't want to do it to a certain extent, just because you're the pack leader. But a horse has got that whole other level because, as you said, it's a prey animal, and I think a lot of people wouldn't think of a horse as being a prey animal. They think of it as a working animal, perhaps. With us being okay, I guess having dominion over the horse, but a horse is an incredibly powerful animal, and if it does not want you on its back, it will kick you off.
It certainly will. It certainly will. Yep.
Yeah. So I guess you're really forced to be very present,
Yes.
and very in the moment, which is probably part of why it has that profound mental well-being impact. So for you, with your long history of working with and being around horses, is there any kind of, I guess, pivotal moment for you, like a core memory, from your childhood or adulthood, where you've been working with or been on or around a horse, where you've just felt like you have learnt something really profound, or that really made it stick out, that, oh, this is why horses are so powerful in this way?
Uh, well, the first horse that was really mine, um, my dad bought me when I was 12, and she we went to see I was so excited, I was so excited. So he said, "We're going to go and see her." So we got in the car and we went to this bush paddock, and in the distance there were these horses just galloping. And he said, "Yours is the grey at the front." And I was thinking, she doesn't seem very, I was expecting to see her in a yard where I could pat her. Anyway, we got her home, and she was really wild. And she had a 6-month-old colt at foot, that colt foal at foot, that she was very protective of. And I every day after school, I would try to ride Sheba. It was her name was Sheba. I have another grey mare called Sheba now. Um, uh, and it was just all I wanted to do was ride this horse. But every time I tried to ride her, she would buck me off. And I don't think my mother realized how often I'd fallen off. But my dad said to me, "Oh well, try again tomorrow. She'll be fine. You just have to keep trying." And it took me almost 6 months before she accepted me. And
Well,
when she did accept me, though, like, we had the most wonderful life together, and it taught me courage, because I wanted so badly to ride her, but if I gave up, I would never get my wish. So she taught me courage. Eventually she just let me, but I fell off so many times, and I never fell off her again after that. Um, because I think she admired me too. you know, she thought I was worthy of being her leader because I never gave up. And so, yeah, that's. I mean, I already adored horses, but she was just the icing on the cake. Um, for me to just ride her and we'd go galloping sort of through the bush or down the road, and knowing how what a struggle it had been to get there made me feel that I was made me value myself. Um, yeah.
That's beautiful, Jennifer. Absolutely beautiful. And look, just in a nutshell, look, the courageousness and learning resilience, right?
Yes.
Falling down, literally getting back up again. They
Yes.
always say get back on the horse. I mean,
They do.
you quite literally had to do that for 6 months. That's such a profound thing. And I would say that that probably marries quite well into the life or reality of a writer, because I was only thinking as you were speaking, if we go back again, you were a lawyer. That comes with a whole set of structures and rules and, to a certain extent, outcomes that, if you do X, Y, and Z, here are the potential outcomes. There's a pathway laid out for you. But as an author, there's so much uncertainty. Is my storyline any good? Will it make a good book? Will someone publish it? Will it be received well? All of that. So you've got to have a lot of resilience and courage to go down that pathway. And I always think my family motto, because we've got a Scottish background,
Okay.
roughly translated means stay the course. And I
Okay.
think about this often when I'm up against my own challenges or even up against my own ego or pride, when I'm thinking this is getting hard, I don't really want to do the work. And so it sounds like you sort of had that, both instilled by the horse but also by your dad at a young
Yes.
age. Do you think that has carried you through all of these transitions in your life?
Um, well, it certainly gave me a good foundation, and my dad um, was such a wonderful man with such a such a love of the land, um, and such an honourable person, that, yeah, it's given me a very good foundation. But I often think, what would have happened if I hadn't persevered? Um, and my life would have been diminished, um, definitely diminished. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think sometimes that is the question, isn't it? Maybe we only understand things in hindsight sometimes, but it's always good to take that moment to reflect and think, if I hadn't done those things, if I hadn't pushed through when it got a little bit tricky, or taken that pathway when it just seemed like my world was falling apart, how would I have ever got here? Would I have ever got here, and what my life would have looked like? And I guess to a certain extent, we'll never really know,
No.
but you have a feeling, I think, in your instinct when you're on the right pathway. So for you, when you turned back towards writing, and particularly given that you have so much of the Australian landscape, you have so many animals included, did it feel like for you that you had found home, you had found the pathway you were meant to be on finally?
Yes, it did. And as you say, with the law, it's. I mean, there are people at the heart of it, but it's a logical, rational sort of process of dealing with people. Whereas writing, it's just like it's the wild frontier. You there's no rules. Um, there's no set way into it. I mean, people said I'd never get an agent. People said I'd never get a publisher. Um, they said that you had to be gorgeous or very young, and I was in my early 40s, late 30s. You had to be sort of famous, have some sort of string to your bow, uh, and yet, and if I'd listened to all those people, I wouldn't have persevered. But a friend of mine and myself, we both did a writing course at the Victorian Writers Centre. It's now, I think, called Writers Victoria. But it was called the Year of the Novel. And I just assumed that you'd start the year and at the end you'd have a novel. Well, my friend Kath and I were the only ones who actually had a novel. The others seemed to think it was more like, just a sort of a writing group. Um, but you didn't have to finish your novel. Well, anyway, we both did. And then we thought, what are we going to do with it now? Because we had no connections at all. And someone suggested we went to a writers' conference where you could pitch to publishers. So you only got a 5-minute pitch. I think mine was about 3 minutes I got. And I was lucky enough to pitch to Belinda Byrne of Penguin, who is um, the sister of Jennifer Byrne of First Tuesday Book Club fame. And she was an acquiring editor. And I gave her my pitch, and in 6 weeks I had a contract for Brumby's Run.
How incredible.
And my friend Kath got a contract too. She doesn't write what I write. She did write. She doesn't write anymore, but she wrote lady detective novels. Those sort of novels. And we both succeeded to get a contract. And I was thinking, I'd been told so often that you couldn't get a publisher, you couldn't get an agent, you couldn't do this, you couldn't do that. And I could. I was like the little engine who could.
I love that. I love that. But I mean, how disheartening to hear. And I mean, it's not an uncommon thing, Jennifer. I'm sure you've heard this from other people that are creatives in their field or artists in their field. People are told so often they have to fit this perfect mold,
Yes.
this little
Yeah,
bite-sized box, and yet that is so in opposition to
it is.
creativity. It's sort of, they find something about you as an individual, your talent, your skill, whatever it is that you bring to it, and they like it, but then they want to sort of chop all the bits off until it fits this perfect little box. And yet that's just, I've really never heard any, famous or celebrated artist of any kind saying, well, I was this, this, and this. That's exactly what they looked for, and that's it.
That's right.
It's never that pathway.
Belinda didn't care how old I was, what I looked like, um, what my credentials were. I had no publishing credentials. She didn't care about any of that. She just cared about the manuscript. And it was so empowering to know that some people will actually take you at face value for who you are. And it also made me think that all these people who were saying, all the naysayers who said that it won't work, a lot of them were too scared to try. And so they made excuses for not being able to, not, succeeding. Um, and a lot of them were excuses because both Kath and I proved that you can actually succeed if you have it, if you have enough talent and courage and and perseverance, um,
Mm.
and a heart and a work ethic. You've got to, the other writers in that group didn't finish their novels. Kath and I both did. We both got contracts. So it's it's just thinking, you've just got to put the work in sometimes. It won't always work, but it certainly can.
Yeah, and what a beautiful message for people to hear too, because I think there's so many people with an abundance of talent who have been told these exact same kinds of
Yes,
things or have had them reinforced by society, culture, social media, whatever it may be, and they just stop doing what they're really, really born to do because of these messages. And it's just the polar opposite. It's, I always think you're here to live.
you
You're
are.
here to live. So do what you want to do. And I'm so glad that you followed the pathway and you just chased it down. And it makes me think about, Christy, your character from your book, Wild Horses. And I see so much of what you're talking about reflected in the story of
Oh,
what she's
good.
experiencing. It's just so beautiful to kind of see that parallel there between that character and your own experience. I just sort of think there's so many reasons why a character like her, a teacher in a school up against sort of a scandal with no fault of her own, has been somewhat pushed in a different direction. She's grabbed onto the first opportunity that's presented itself, which happens to be in relation to equine therapy, and from there, just the courage and resilience to keep following these different pathways um, is just so incredibly beautiful. And
Good.
within that, you actually paint such a beautiful picture in the start of the book of what it's like to be a teacher of high school students, particularly a drama teacher. And as a kid that was in drama classes, and I did that throughout my whole life, I
Okay.
was absolutely transported. I was 13 years ago, 13 years again, sitting inside a classroom, and the same kind of chatter between all the different kids in the school, the
Okay.
boys in the school. It was so real, Jennifer. How did you do that? Do you have
Well,
a background in drama?
no, I don't. I think it was a combination of research and talking to some couple of drama teachers, and just my knowledge of teenage boys. I've had three boys, so I kind of know how they think a little bit. So yeah, it was just a hodgepodge of things. Mm.
Yeah, well, it was beautifully done, and I like the number of sort of transformations that the character makes throughout the journey, and I think it's an important piece of work in that it really shows that people have the option to change and transform, and that
Mm.
sometimes what seems like sort of the off the beaten track pathway that you end on could actually be the one that opens up way more doors for you than what you thought that it would. You know, very often people think they've failed because their career has had to change for whatever, or their relationship has broken down or whatever it may be, and they feel like everything is dead in the water. Nothing's going to
Yeah.
come. Everything from here is downhill, and yet you've really demonstrated through this book that that is absolutely not the case, and that, you know, a life I think worth living in many ways is one where you keep on chasing, and keep walking the pathways, whatever ones they present to you.
Well, one of my favorite poets is Robert Frost, and of course he wrote the famous um, poem with the lines, two paths diverged in a wood, and I took the one least travelled by, and that made all the difference.
Mm, beautiful words. Beautiful words. And words to live by, Jennifer.
Oh, yes, yes.
Absolutely. So, just thinking again about your beautiful book, Wild Horses, and I think your breadth of work really, you do cover the Australian landscape, in particularly the wild places of the Australian landscape, so much. And obviously, you know live in West Gippsland with your family. So, why are you so, I guess, invested in continuing to explore the Australian landscape? Like a lot of authors would do this once or twice, and then they would move on to maybe a different country or a completely different landscape. But you really include it in so much of your work. Why is that endlessly fascinating for you?
Well, it's the only thing I want to write. Um,
Mm,
that it's such an important thing. Conservation, sorry, conservation in this land doesn't get enough attention and the importance of it. And you know, we're facing an extinction crisis. We Australia has the worst mammalian extinction rate of any country, and that's shocking when you think about how much land we have, um, and and other countries are so, you know, overpopulated and, you know, haven't got much room, but a lot of other countries are doing better than we are. So it's something important for me. I can't imagine it wanting to write anything else. The new novel I'm writing is the theme is going to be wildlife trafficking, and it's going to be set in Kakadu. So that's you can't run out of important environmental issues in this country or any other country, I imagine. Um, I I have no interest in writing anything else.
yeah, how beautifully put, Jennifer. And that is shocking when you think that we have the worst.
I know
That makes me so sad to think about that because, again, we're probably not communicated very well about these things. Maybe they get a bit buried in the media and other such things. People don't seem to talk about this stuff enough. And you're right, we have so much unique flora and fauna, and
hmm,
we really probably don't give it quite the respect that we need to when we're in this sort of climate change crisis and we're seeing all of these changes across the world. They're happening on the home front too.
they are.
And yeah. And I mean, do you find because you actually, you know, live in a more rural area, do you see those things in real time actually happening? Are they right in front of your eyes?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I live in a bushfire risk area, and the the amount of bushfire catastrophic days, which are labelled as such, has risen exponentially over even the last decade. And when you look around at the floods, in the Lismore floods, and so many, the clear felling in the Tarkine in Tasmania, there's clear. Thank goodness that there is going to be some end to the native logging around here, but there's been clear felling around here, and the one absolutely traumatizing thing for me was seeing a log truck go past with a possum clinging to the top of a log, a giant log, and I was thinking, where are their homes? These weren't. I mean, I'm all for logging. We need timber, but not old growth native forests.
Mm.
Not old growth native forests. So yes, I see it. I see it around here, and I love the fact that I can protect my property. Um, it has bush gullies. It has lyrebirds. When we fenced off the gullies, I got a grant to fence off all the gullies from stock. Within 3 months, there were lyrebirds back in the gullies. So, yeah, that was pretty cool.
That's amazing. It's so nice to see when nature returns, and it goes to show again, to the theme that comes up so much in your writing, and particularly in this book, that idea of second chances, that rebirth or regrowth. I think of a journey, of a pathway, to be able to see that in nature as close up as you clearly can, must reinforce such that beautiful concept that there's always possibility, there's always hope for change.
Yes, absolutely, there is. I mean, the
Mm.
lyrebirds are resilient, and we should try to be resilient too.
Yeah, exactly right. And this also comes up in again in the book with wild horses. There's romance in this book too. It is a rural romance fiction book, and your character really finds an unexpected love in an
Yes.
unexpected place. Um, as is so often the case, I think, for people, but maybe logically we don't really realize that it's just going to pop up in front of you. But there's always that second chance. There's always that hope that you'll find someone to be your companion, whether it's for a little bit of time or a long time. Is there a particular reason why you were drawn to writing this particular storyline, or I guess really like a romance set in this way?
Well, to be absolutely frank, when I first started writing this book, I was addicted to MasterChef.
Yes, I love hearing that.
And my hero, my male love interest, um, emerged as a celebrity chef. Uh, and that's what gave me the idea of him. And then the more I thought about him, the more gorgeous he seemed. And I thought, well, look, I'll make him a somebody who's perhaps puts his work above his children, because you could see the passion in these chefs. They have a passion, but how balanced are they? I was thinking, can it overtake you like any passion can? So it just gave me the idea for an a bit of an interesting love interest for.
Yeah, I love how life sort of just planted that seed for you because, as you said, you were watching MasterChef, and he is a very compelling character, a very interesting character. Also, because he's going through his own set of second chances, really, in so many ways as well, not just your female main character. Particularly with him and his son being brought to this equine therapy. I don't want to give away too much of your book, Jennifer, so I'll just say that much. But there's an exploration there between the bond between father and son. What was, I guess, the inspiration for that for you, for picking that storyline, that particular story point?
I think that all characters, all main characters, and in a, a book like that has romantic elements like my novel does, um, there's the two main characters both need a character arc. You can't just, as a construct. I mean, there are sort of ways that you construct a story, and I tend to follow the 3-act structure, like first act, second act, third act, and the character arc has to travel through those acts, um, and each character has to end up in a different place, since I'm not writing tragedies, in a better place. So, and also the fact that my son had connected so well with my horse Lofty, who the equine character is based on, I thought it'd be a nice triangle of the father, the son, and the horse, all having to overcome their trust issues. Yeah, so it was just an interesting trust triangle.
I really like that, a trust triangle. And it's beautifully written. It's very compelling. I think even if you're not a parent, for example, you can really understand the struggle and the journey that's going on between the characters in those ways. And again, having Lofty in there, as in a way a conduit to that growth journey is so beautiful, and again circles back to what we were talking about before, of the profound impact that you can have on your life by having an animal in your life, particularly obviously in your case, with horses too. So I just wanted to kind of touch on, before we close out our time together, Jennifer, but I really wanted to ask you what the key, I guess, message, or even maybe the key question is that you are posing to the reader with your new book, Wild Horses. What is it that you want for them to kind of take away or think about when they're reading this book?
Well, I, I think I'd like people to think about second chances and fresh starts, and how everybody, whether human or animal, deserves that.
Mm, yeah. And again, so beautifully demonstrated in the book. I mean, I got that immediately, and it really has made me sort of think and ponder and have a lot of introspection as well. So I really really appreciate that. You really are an incredible talent. I mean, you've got 11 novels, so you must know at this point, Jennifer, that you're an incredible talent. But it is such a pleasure to get to talk to you about your body of work and your life experiences, and what a thrilling story arc you have had personally too. So thank you for taking some time today to talk to me.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, truly my pleasure. Now, anyone that has been watching or listening to this interview today, please, please go out and get yourself a copy of Wild Horses. And of course, while you're there, why don't you go grab one of, or all of, Jennifer's amazing body of work of 11 novels. And it's exciting to know she's got more coming down the track. So you can follow her on social media, on Facebook at Jen Scoullar, or you can go to jenniferscoullar.com, which is her website, and keep up to date there. And as always, let's really treasure and support our local authors. So if you have the opportunity to leave a review after you've purchased and read the book, please do that. It helps
Yes.
immensely.
Reviews are of great help to
Yes,
authors.
exactly, exactly. So please make sure that you do support our local authors. And again, just really thinking about some of those gorgeous themes that we have discussed today. I guess more than anything, my hope for you, my beautiful audience, is that you've had an opportunity now to reflect and think about your own life, the power that you have as a human being, but importantly, the power you have to transform, to change, and to take second chances. Make sure you go out and do what it is that you're born to do. And I hope this has really inspired you to do so. I've thoroughly enjoyed this time with you and this time with Jennifer as well. And I look forward to joining you next time on the show.